not just anybody sells a script to Steven Spielberg, especially a 20-year-old. Like, how in the world does that happen?
It does sound crazy when you say it like that, doesn't it?
It sounds crazy any which way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of a product of manifestation. Like, I grew up watching every Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
In my head was like, I read this article once where Spielberg was like, oh, being a film producer means that you put out fires and you solve problems. And I thought to myself, I do that in my family all the time. So like, if I could do that on a movie set, like that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of always stuck with me, always kind of thought about Spielberg and just his career and how he had a vision for every story he told and every character that was just magical.
Yeah.
Just the way he directed scenes and set up worlds, and from the narrative to the visuals to the music. It was just all magic. It just made you feel something that you could never really explain. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever that is, that's what I'm going to do. And so what ended up happening was I went through traditional Hollywood. I started as an assistant. Fate kind of put me in right place, right time.
Welcome, everybody, to the Manager's Playbook. It gives me extreme pleasure to bring you another episode featuring the incredible multi-hyphenate Shara Senderoff. Shara's career has no bounds, truly. From selling a script to Steven Spielberg at the age of 21 to founding Sushi Intern and launching a tech investment fund with Scooter Braun, yes, that's Scooter Braun, and Zach Katz, a mentor of mine, Shara has consistently operated at the highest levels. Now, the Philly native is breaking new ground in artificial intelligence with Gen, an ethical AI music company that sets to shake up the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to keep this short because a conversation like this doesn't come cheap. Without further ado, Shara Senderoff. Honestly speaking, and you know this, I have no idea where to start with you.
Yeah.
Because it is an incredible story. You've done so many amazing things. Honestly, I think we should just maybe start from the beginning. Like, tell me a bit about where you come from and like your upbringing and how'd you get to where you're at here?
So I was born in Philly. So I have Philly in my blood. I have Philly sports in my blood. I'm a diehard Eagles fan.
Shout out the Eagles.
And I feel like when you come from Philly, you just have kind of a tenacity and a grit. Troy. There's lots of people from Philly.
Yes.
I feel like Philly always stayed in my blood. It was just kind of blue collar. You just think of something you want to do and you just go do it. Just getting it done is kind of the mentality. So I feel like that's kind of in my soul. I think you always like end up becoming a product of where you were raised.
Yep.
You, great example.
Yeah,
but I think that's a huge part of me. And then kind of just always knew that I wanted to tell stories in my life. So I never had that moment where I was like, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? It was just, I'm being it. I'm just continuing to kind of go and evolve.
Oh, interesting. So you never thought about like, this is like, I'm going to be a director. I'm going to go into film. Like, I love to do this.
I loved movies growing up. I just was like, wanted to be a part of that, but I never never had this moment where I was like, I should be this when I grow up. It was just, I just was on the track and I was like, I'm going to film school. My parents were like, what? We don't know anyone who has gone to film school. We're not creative in the least bit. We don't know people my dad's a salesman. My mom was in the medical industry. There was no like filmmaking in our family.
Yeah.
There was just no roadmap for what I was gonna do and no one to follow. And so I think it truly, like I remember saying to my parents when I was younger, I was like, I'm gonna move to LA and make movies. And my dad was like I think they just were like looking at me like, okay, well, like, where is this from? Which I think is really interesting. Like, I always felt like there was just a knowing. I just have always had a vision and a path and a force that was guiding me that I was just going with it. Mm-hmm. There was never no moments where I like chose. I just followed, and it kind of brought me out to LA, and this is the land of creativity. And I think the land of creativity allows you to just create. And so everything I went on to do, which definitely had its bumps and bruises and twists and turns. And by the way, I say bumps and bruises and it sounds negative. It's just like part of the experience. There was nothing. I just was kind of navigated through an amazing course of now it's really hard to be like, where did all this come from? And how did one thing lead to the other? Because it's not a chronological and very seamless narrative of what my career has become and where I've gotten to.
No, not at all. But I think also like I believe you mentioned to me that at the age of 20, when you're now exploring this world of film, you sell a script to Steven Spielberg. Not just anybody sells a script to Steven Spielberg, especially a 20-year-old. Like, how in the world does that happen?
It does sound crazy when you say it like that, doesn't it?
It sounds crazy any which way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of a product of manifestation. Like, I grew up watching every Spielberg movie. Yeah. In my head was like, I read this article once where Spielberg was like, oh, being a film producer means that you put out fires and you solve problems. And I thought to myself, I do that in my family all the time. So like, if I could do that on a movie set, like that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of always stuck with me, always kind of thought about Spielberg and just his career and how he had a vision for every story he told and every character that was just magical. Yeah. Just the way he directed scenes and set up worlds, and from the narrative to the visuals to the music. It was just all magic. It just made you feel something that you could never really explain. And I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. Whatever that is, that's what I'm gonna do. And so what ended up happening was I went through traditional Hollywood. I started as an assistant. Fate kind of put me in right place, right time. I worked for a big producer named Mark Gordon. And at the time he had Grey's Anatomy and Criminal Minds, and I was his assistant in Speed. And
that was my favorite movie when I was a kid. I love that movie. Yeah.
Amazing movie. And I was his assistant, and I ended up getting my hands on a script that I ended up submitting for a couple of big actors, and it ended up coming together. That kind of became my first project. When I was like 21 years old, I was a part of putting together a project. And then after that, I turned around and said, oh, I love the movie Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead with Christina Applegate. It was a movie I grew up loving. Movie. And I was like, hey, Mark, can I go get the rights to remake this movie? Crazy. And he was like, you can go try. Like, he was kind of like, didn't expect
you to say that?
Me to be his assistant and be like, I want to go put this together. So basically, more or less, without saying it, he was like, if you don't fuck up being my assistant, you can go put projects together. So I went and got the rights, put a writer on it who's a friend of mine to this day, and we developed
hold on. How did you get the rights?
Okay, so I brushed past that. So you kind of do your homework to figure out who had the rights. At the time, they were controlled by HBO. Okay. So I worked at the Mark Gordon Company. So it was a phone call in to say like, hey, we want to talk about getting the rights to go remake Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And I'm oversimplifying, but like when you call from a place that has a prestigious producer and you can navigate the conversations, you can give them a pitch that gives you a period of time that you can go out and pitch the rights for, try to come up with a story and go pitch the rights to make the movie. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a one phone call. They weren't like, oh yes, you can have the rights. It was a bit of a process, but we got it done. And then I put a writer on it who was a really brilliant writer. And she came in and came up with a take, and we decided how we would spin a remake of it. And then we went out and pitched it to all the studios. And one of the first studios that we were at, so you go out and you pitch it to multiple film studios, and either someone buys it or they don't. Now, I'm sort of oversimplifying, but that's a good way to oversimplify. They either buy it or they don't. Yep. So we go take the pitch to DreamWorks. It was one of the first meetings of the day, or the first meeting of the day, and we're sitting in the lobby, the writer and myself, and one of my friends who was also developed the project with us, and we were sitting in the lobby and shooting the shit and like being kids. I mean, I was like 21 years old, and in walks Spielberg with one of his lawyers. And I kind of like had this moment where I'm like, am I dead? Like, is this like, is this real? Is this reality? Am I dreaming? Like, what's going on? Because it was DreamWorks, so Spielberg was at the time very active, but I did not expect him to walk into the building. So he walks in and we kind of freeze and look at him, and he's like, what are you girls doing here? Uh-huh. And we're like, we're here to pitch a movie. And he pulls up a chair and he's like, what's the movie? What's the pitch?
Pitch it to me.
And the rest is history.
Wait, so he was the person you were going to pitch it to?
No. We were pitching
but he just pulled up the chair.
We were pitching it to an executive that was there that worked at DreamWorks.
Yeah.
And he just happened to walk through the lobby, like coming in from a breakfast. And then we ended up selling the movie. It ended up falling apart years later because there was a whole thing. HBO didn't want to give the TV rights up, and there was a bunch of nuance and kind of that. So the movie never got made, but I don't think it was supposed to get made. I think it was a moment where I was supposed to understand that whatever I think could become reality. And if I love Spielberg and I want to make movies like him, who's to say that I can't make a movie with him?
Right.
So I think that was a moment in time where it was like the beginning of a realization for me that Hollywood can seem really overwhelming and really hard to break into, but you create your own reality.
Yeah.
And whatever path you want to take, you take.
I love that.
And so that was kind of my permission to, in a lot of ways, like go follow my heart and tell the stories I want to tell in whatever the medium is that it was, which started out as film and TV. And then I've obviously navigated into music and into technology, and you name it, I'm in it.
And we'll talk about all that. There's so much of that. Now, in that moment though, when it all falls apart, you're still at the studio, or you're still at the production company, I should say, when you don't get the movie made.
It was years later. So like it went into like a development cycle. We were trying to negotiate the rights.
Sure, years later, but you're still involved, trying to figure it out. Now, in that moment, while you're going through that, for someone who, it's their first maybe big project, are you like heartbroken that this isn't going through, or you immediately recognize in that moment, I don't think this was supposed to get made? Like,
no,
are
actually,
you consciously it
didn't even get there, because it was kind of like you develop a huge slate of movies, so it wasn't just one. I wasn't like just sitting waiting for this one. I started developing a bunch of other projects. And the next thing I knew, I had a slate of like 10 to 20 films in development. And so it's just, that's another one.
Gotcha.
That was there. But it was a moment of magic. I mean, it was like movie magic in real life. Like, who else, how many people in the world have a moment where they're sitting in a place and the person that they were like, oh, I want to do this. You showed me the vision of
by picking up
what I can make.
By picking up a magazine at 13 or 12.
And here you come right past me.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
You can't explain it.
I can't explain it.
Yeah. So you just have to kind of
divinity.
Believe that the things that you want to happen will.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And how'd you end up getting into music at that point then? You're going into music now?
Long way from there. So I was in film and TV, so I was developing a bunch of movies, and I ended up having this vision for digital content, short form content. So this is before the social platforms, before Hulu.
I'm not surprised.
I tend to have this thing that's a blessing.
Why am I not surprised?
It's a blessing and a curse. I see these visions for where things are going to go 5 to 10 years before.
Yeah.
Cool, that sounds amazing. Oh, you see all these things that before they happen. Yeah, well, that's really been hard because no one understands that what's to come, or they don't see it the way you see it. And so then you end up in this relentless cycle where you're like trying to explain to people, no, I think this is how it's going to evolve.
Yeah.
And so we need to do this and this to get ahead. So at the time I had this vision for the fact that the movie business was relying at the time on their survival, or their thriving or surviving with their particular movie was based on what happened at the box office.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still really, in a lot of ways, it still is.
Yeah.
In many ways, it still is. But so it was, well, this isn't sustainable because we can't just like spend millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars making movies for them to just bomb at the box office and we lose all the money. Like that's not a model that would work. And I was naive enough to say like, well, how do you better understand an audience so you can develop a story for the right people, and then you can attract them into the theater, into the viewing experience in the right way. Like, what would that look like? And I was like, well, the only place we can really, at the moment, understand audience is online. So I was like, so we should develop short form content, put it out at the quality we were making Grey's Anatomy and Criminal Minds and all these big shows for the internet, put it out first there as like a testing ground, be able to see like, what is the demographic, psychographic, geographic, even full audience that you could build online that would give the movie studios or the television studios more confidence in making the idea or the IP, and then go from there. Well, this was like not a logical thing at the time. Like now it's like, of course that's the only way you'd sell anything. But at the time it was like, what do you mean?
What year is this?
This was in 2009.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So this was like, we were calling short form content webisodes.
Right.
Like, I feel like I'm 100.
That's right.
I'm not 100. Right. So it's like, doesn't that feel like you're like a dinosaur?
Yeah,
like webisode?
For me, absolutely. I completely forgot about that term.
Yeah, it's like, what a weird term. And then we were also calling anything digital new media.
Yes.
Well, everything's new media. It's just a new form of media.
Yes.
So like, but we were all like, new media. This is like the big moment.
Yeah.
So I was like, we should create a division at the company to create short form content to distribute online.
Yeah.
And Mark at the time was like, I don't really know what you're talking about, but like,
go for it.
He had enough belief in me and had seen me go do a couple things I had said, and also incredibly grateful for that opportunity, because you often don't get people who are like, go try it.
Yeah.
You more get people that are like, no, that's not the business we're in. But he was like, okay, do what you want. Like, go figure it out. So I started developing a bunch of short form webisodes and ended up kind of testing out influencer marketing. Before it was influencer marketing, there were big actors and actresses that were in some of my shows or some of my movies simultaneously to my short form content. And I said to them like, hey, would you write about my show on your Facebook page? And they were like, sure, what do I write? I'm like, check out my show on this website. And they were like, promotion. Okay. And it was promotion. It was influencer marketing before influencer marketing. I had no idea what I was doing though.
Years before anybody
called it. By the way, I'm not
influencer.
claiming that I knew. I think that's like the beauty is like you have a hunch, your intuition tells you like, think this is where it's going to go. And then your option at that point is find a way to do it or don't. Yeah. So be the person that tries to bring it to fruition. Yeah. So I kind of figured out influencer marketing. And then at that point, I had started this digital division. So I was kind of known at the company as like the girl who was trying these digital things and working with technology. And so one day, Mark had seen a few of his friends invest in Facebook and Twitter. And he was like, let's start investing in a couple things. And I had created a platform in college called Intern Sushi, which was for interns to apply to internships in hard to break into industries. Well, I was in a hard to break into industry now.
So you started that there. So
I started that while I was at the Mark Gordon Company. Mark gave me my initial seed investment, and I ended up building out the platform, and it took off in music. Just as the universe would have it, it took off in music. And the next thing I know, there's record labels, management companies, artists, publishing companies. And I was like, I gotta learn like what's a publishing company and like what are all these people? And so I had all these companies on the site, and they were all posting jobs. And then I start getting all these emails, and they're like, we don't have any applications. Like, there's no one applying to our jobs. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't have any music interns on the site. Like, how was I gonna market? It's the chicken and the egg when you create a marketplace platform. Yes. So I ended up saying like, well, I need to go partner with all the record labels and create these opportunities to promote to music interns. So I partnered with Interscope first, and I did a deal with them to bring an internship for the day with Zed. Have I ever told you this story?
No.
Yeah, so I basically partnered with Interscope. I did a brand deal with Zed. This was before there were brand deals. This wasn't a thing we were doing. A thing either, and we did an internship for the day, and I ran a basically offer on my site, apply to intern with Zed for the day, and it got 50,000 applications.
Really?
And suddenly I had music interns on the site.
Your marketplace was that big. It had
that many
people.
Zed was
massive.
Zed was massive. He had just broken with Clarity.
Right.
So it was like the right place, right time. I understood influencer marketing because I had just tested it on my webisodes. So I was like, oh, okay, this will work. So I started partnering with all the record labels to do internships for the day with all their artists. And as I did that, I started to meet all the people in the marketing departments at the labels. I started to be like, how do you guys market songs? How do you really, what's happening here? How do you understand audience? And like, I started bringing a lot, I started bringing a lot to the table of like, what's going on here? And then the next thing I knew, and I'm sweeping through the story, but ended up selling Intern Sushi a few years later. And the tech platform was something that was connectable elsewhere. And I got immediately all these calls from all the record labels. And they were like, hey, could you come advise on like this project that you had consulted, that you did this artist deal with us? Like, could you help us develop this campaign and that campaign? So I ended up taking on a bunch of consulting jobs with the record labels. And I had to learn the music business now. And then I realized, oh, wait, a song is kind of the same as a movie, just a way shorter version. It tells a story. And it has a lot of heart and has a lot of soul. And there's often a character that it's following, whether it's visible or not.
There's a story there 100%.
And I was like, this is just another medium. It's a new media. It's another medium for me to tell stories. And so I got really into kind of the data side of music and music marketing and ended up connecting with a bunch of different people, just kind of spreading my network and doing a bunch of different kind of one-off consulting jobs, but they started adding up over the years. And I spent a lot of time in music. And then one of the people I ended up meeting was Zach Katz, and he was at BMG at the time. And we started talking about all the technology that I was working on. And Zach and I ended up putting together what became Raised in Space with Scooter, which was a investment fund and incubator to invest in music tech that was on the blockchain, because I had gotten really, really interested in crypto in about 2017, 18, because it was one of the next things. So it was kind of my, that was a long-winded answer of how'd you go from film to music?
No, that's good.
It wasn't one to the other. There was a connection in between that just kind of made sense. It was just take one step, the next step appears.
I remember being in, I think I want to say we were in New York, 2016, maybe 2017, Governor's Ball, first festival Jesse's going to do. And it's a bunch of us sharing an Airbnb. And I'm there with Jesse's DJ at the time, Junior T, who I've known for years. And he pulls up his phone and he's like, he was just deep into like the crypto world. He's always looking at things like that too. And I don't know, I'm not sure if he was invested or not, but he's like, yo, you got to look at this. He's like, the Bitcoin's gone up to $2,000, and we were like looking at it, I was like, 2,000? Wow. This is, what do you mean 2,000? And then I'm thinking there at the time, I'm like, okay, well, the advance is this, I pay a mortgage, I mean, I should put some money. I'm like, nah, not worth it. I think it's like, and then,
For me, it was actually,
you're at the very
top.
Oh my God.
For me, it wasn't so much crypto as it was blockchain.
The blockchain, the technology.
The idea of...
I had no idea of any of this when it was a Bitcoin, there was crypto. I only started to understand and learn it 2020.
Well, that's the phase we're in right now. It's people hear crypto and they think it's some sort of black market scam, and they don't understand the implications of it and why it exists and the technology that's underneath and how powerful and valuable that can be for addressing a lot of big problems that the world is trying to solve. So they jump to, crypto's this, but I think blockchain from a technology perspective. So I ended up kind of finding my way through tech. Like when I built Intern Sushi, it was a marketplace style technology platform, but it forced me, like, in order to understand what my developers who I had hired to build it were saying to me, I thought I had to learn how to code, because like there was like, in my logical mind, I was like, well, I have to learn how to code in order to understand how to lead the technology.
That's the mind of a producer.
Totally. It's like you got to learn the pieces, know how to do everything. So I took coding classes at night and learned how to code. And then that helped me to this day be able to build continuous technology companies and understand technology in a way that like most people who are on the creative side don't have that side of their brain. And I have both of those sides. So when I remember reading the Bitcoin paper in 2016 and then going down the rabbit hole of what is blockchain. And when I understood that blockchain was a technology that could allow for the authenticity and authentication of data and assets and finances, and I looked at like a lot of the components of the world that lacked transparency, how much of that do we see all day long? And I realized that I had seen so much of it in so many ways coming up in all of these businesses. I was like, wow, what could be done if you could utilize a technology that could make things more transparent and more efficient, and you could be able to own and control things yourself and not necessarily have them controlled by others. What could happen to the world with that type of technology? And that was enough. And then I was down the rabbit hole of, what is this? Who are the players? What's going on here? How does it work? How could we utilize that for a deeper artist to music fan relationship? So I started thinking about how I could market music artists, because that's a lot of what I was working on with a bunch of the record labels. And I got really interested in it. And then when I met Zach and we came together with Scooter, Scooter was like, well, I have an opportunity to partner with a blockchain company, Ripple, and invest in companies that are building at the intersection of music and blockchain. And I was like, it was just a moment.
It was no brainer.
It was just a moment in time. It was a no-brainer, and it was more of kind of that smirk, like, oh, the universe is doing it again.
Yeah.
It's just making sense.
Right.
And so there I was with a knowledge of what blockchain could do and a contextual understanding of what it could do for music. And at the time, there were very few people talking about blockchain, let alone talking about music and blockchain.
100%.
So I think that, like, if I look back at my journey, I was continuously someone talking about the bridging or the application of two entertainment industries, leveraging either technology or something that was not here yet, but that made sense to me because of the experiences I had prior to that, that allowed me to be like, oh, this is what we could do if we play around with this.
And so tell me, because that's when we met, when you started Raised in Space with Zach and Scooter. And I remember the first time we met, I remember we had breakfast or lunch, and you brought up community. And that was the first thing that you talked to me about. And I'm like, yeah, it made complete sense what you were telling me about community. And yeah, of course, like, the email at the time, you're not getting to the fans, right? And so for those who don't know, community is a SMS platform where you can message, from a company or an artist direct.
Direct to SMS,
direct
not
to SMS.
Into an app,
yeah,
which
exactly.
is a
not to
huge deal.
A massive deal.
And
so, like, it's literally, it comes through like a text message.
Yeah.
And this is the time when nobody was using it. It was brand new.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me about this, and my eyes just like lit up, and I'm like, I'm going to hang out with Shara all the time. I'm going to call her.
I think you said that. I think you were like, I need to know about all this stuff you're looking at.
Oh, I was wide-eyed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I said that to you. I was like, anything you're looking at, you let me know.
Yeah, because I love the idea of finding pieces of technology or companies that were trying to solve a really important problem. And the problem at the time,
to this day.
This is maybe an age-old, will be forever problem.
Yeah.
Hopefully things will change it. I do think there's another medium that could change it. But so at the time it was
you got it.
That's Web3.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah, that's the blockchain.
Okay.
So, but more to come on that. But so I do think it was community as a platform was something that an artist could go direct to their fans. So they were circumventing all of the challenges of, well, how do I find out the data of who's coming to my tours? And I remember, and to your credit, and this is one of the things I love about you, you were like, I got to jump in. Jesse has to see this, and we have to figure out how we could use this. And I talked to her about it. The ability for her to go directly to her fans.
Yeah.
Is something that couldn't happen in that capacity anymore, to put out a message and then instantly get a response back and engagement back from your fans in a deeper way than you could with an Instagram comment or
100%.
a TikTok.
Yeah.
It was a really big deal.
It was a very direct relationship.
Yeah.
And if you're using it, I think, in the right way, and you are spending time and you are building with the fans and you are communicating with them on that platform, or if your brand, whatever, because it's, sports teams are using it, and restaurants and chains and all that, they're all using it. But at the time, it was mostly artist driven or celebrity driven, I think. And I remember just thinking, like, I was like, Jesse, like, if you just spend some time here, like, this will deepen the engagement with your fans, which is great, because, like, that's what you want as well as an artist, to grow your brand, but do it in an authentic way, right? But it was just like a exciting time. Like, now in 2024, it's kind of everywhere, but we're talking 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
It was brand new. It just so happened that, I don't know if you remember, but she was hurt. And that's when we launched it.
Right.
Because
she was available.
Well, she's available. Yeah. And then we had to cancel a bunch of tours.
Yeah.
And so I think she came up with this idea, which was brilliant. And she's just like, yo, why don't I just like tell people that like I'm high on pills right now because of my back pain? Because she had she had an injury in her back. And she's like, and then I'll just like put the number on my stories. I was like, yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, and then tons of people came in.
I think we had like 20,000 people in like 24 hours came in.
Totally.
I had people calling me and texting me like, yo, your artist is high on drugs right now. Giving away her phone number, and I'm like, oh no. And I'm like sending the screenshots to Jesse and Byron.
At the beginning, it was like...
It was amazing. And everybody's like, what is going on? And then obviously, you know, it was the white space. It was the blue ocean. Yeah. And that's what I think was like so amazing about you and meeting you, because you're always in that blue ocean area. I don't even know, you're giving context as to like how you actually started to create these funds, but what are the steps?
The blue ocean thing, I think, is an important part of this.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people don't talk about that. So in my reality, in my perspective of the world, you always have the opportunity to be in a blue ocean. And for context, for people who don't know, and do you know it from Blue Ocean Strategy?
Well, Mark Gillespie introduced me to it.
Yeah, so I read that book in college, and it stayed with me ever since. And it talks about how if you're in a red ocean, you're in a sea of competitors. Yeah. And if you could have the same type of business and even the same business model, but if your positioning is different, you can move yourself over to an ocean where there's no competitors.
Cirque du Soleil would be like the best example of that.
Or Yellowtail, the wine.
Right.
And there's a lot of great examples, but I kind of always viewed that book really had a deep impact on me, because I looked at everything that I've gone on to build at, well, how do I put this in a blue ocean? Because I truly believe that everything can be, that there truly is no such thing as competition. I view that it's kind of like my ethos in the world. Like, I don't think I'm competing against anyone. I don't think you are. I think you're a unique individual. I think
it's competing a lot with myself, actually.
You're only competing with yourself. And I think it's a really important nuance for people to understand, because everyone's always looking outside of them to say like, well, who's doing what around me? And like, should I emulate that? Or should I be some of that? Or should I be some of this? And I always think, why are you trying to be anyone else? You're uniquely you, and that's what makes you special. Yes. And I think that when you build a business that way, you are building something that is very unique, whether there's someone doing a similar thing or not. And I think that mindset and that concept is kind of what I've brought to everything that I've built. And so it's allowed a lot of the things that I've put together to shine in their own unique way. And I think that is a philosophy that I think a lot of people skip when they start.
How does your mind get to that place?
A lot of meditation.
Yeah.
Like a ton
of time with yourself.
A lot of time looking within. I never was a fan of, like, I would always look at reality outside of me. And I kind of had this moment at one point where I was like, the world, in my view, the world is an ugly kind of place. I was like, you hear a lot of people saying like, everyone's divisive. It's this war, it's that war. It's what side are you on? It's what side is this person on it? There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of negativity. And I was like, that is what I see outside of me, but I don't feel that within me. I feel joy and peace, and that comes from a lot of meditation. And so then I started to study a lot of these different modalities of looking within and allowing your internal reality to create your external reality. And once I started spending a lot of time in sort of a more spiritual, like being with me sense, like looking at and thinking about who I am and who I want to be in the world, I ended up just focusing there. And everything else that I ended up doing just came so naturally because it was coming from me. I was the creator of it. It wasn't, oh, someone gave me this idea or this person wants this to be this way. It was, this is the way I see it. And this is what my version of reality could be. So, but it takes a lot of sitting quietly, a lot of listening to yourself and asking yourself, like, who do you want to be in the world? Because no one else tells you that. And I think that's a really interesting thing about like working at places. Because like when as I like trace back my story, I think about how like I was always uncomfortable when I had to work for someone. I always like was like, why don't your vision is okay, like in the sense of it's your reality. So it might be your version of success, like, but it is your vision.
When you're working for somebody else.
Yeah, and working for someone else. I was like, I want to follow my vision because I want to live the things I see in my head. I don't want to live someone else's because it's theirs.
Yeah.
And so that is something that's like a really, I think, fascinating part of the life of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Is that you don't want to work for someone else. You want to control your own destiny. And that was a huge part of, I think, how I've navigated a lot of the things I've navigated is they've just come from me.
Yeah.
So they take me to really fun places. They're places I want to go.
And that's where the curiosity comes from?
I think the thing about being curious that's really interesting is you can always be curious. Like, are you ever going to find or know everything?
No.
You're never going to know anything. Like, how much could we possibly know in the time that we have?
Yeah, right. And even I think part that I find interesting as well too is that when you go and really deep dive into something and you feel like you know everything, something
then you don't know anything.
Exactly.
You realize
something
you don't know
triggers
anything.
it and you're like, oh my God, everything. Sometimes it's a little daunting for me actually when I'm going through, a belief and you get to this place where you're like, am I going to continue going down this path? And if I do, well, that's a dogma, right? Or am I actually going to look at this and just be like, all right.
Do you think you're curious because you're trying to find something?
It's a great question.
I just flipped it.
Yeah.
I just flipped it.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I just flipped the interview.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what we're here for the podcast. I think I'm always, I don't know if I'm trying to find something. Sometimes I don't know if I'm running away from like my past and, it's going to get deep. But but it's like,
I go deep. Everyone knows.
It's one of those things. And when I say my past, maybe like at a surface level, I didn't come from like really poor, background or anything like that. But my father was extremely poor in Colombia, 14 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And my mom, she was affluent in Colombia, but when she came to Canada, and both my parents came in like around 72. The money didn't stretch for my mother, so she had to do a lot of odd jobs. But like, I remember growing up in an area that was like lower middle income class in a part of Toronto, and I never felt poor at home. But when I became I was like 12 or 13 or 14, I started to realize that like money's not like, because I'm also an only child, and so my folks always made me feel like
14 siblings to
one.
Only child.
An only child. My mom had 5, and then and so now it's the only child. And I just, at a certain age, I started to feel like money is a, I don't want to say it's like it was a big problem, but it was thought about and talked about a lot in my home. And then I started to get older and realize, okay, like, this is the reality. And my neighborhood was like, there was a lot going on in my neighborhood at the time as well too. It was just shit going on left and right. When my mom moved out of that neighborhood when I was like 18 or 19, we moved into a quiet neighborhood, and she's like, it's too quiet here. Like, what do you mean? She's like, I miss the sirens.
Oh, it was always like, so not used to it.
She's so not used to it. But so when I just had this thing where I'm like, I'm not, and it was very material. Yeah. I'm like, I'm not going to, I don't want to live this kind of life where like I'm always have to consider and think about money. I want to be able to like, and figure out how to make something of myself from a financial standpoint. Yep. I didn't know that was going to also like create who I am as a human being and like, and that as well too, right? I was just thinking like, I got to get rich at a very surface level. And then that was really like, I think with just like a lot of that was just like, well, how does that happen?
Yeah.
How does that work?
How do they do that? Who accomplished what?
You know what? Now that, and it's not about me. This is about you. But like, I remember being 17 years old and first getting the internet at my place and getting a computer, and we have it. And I was 17 years old, and now I have all this information, And I'm all of a sudden
now
just
you can find anything.
And I'm deep diving into like the stories of Jay-Z and what is Rockefeller and who's Dame Dash, who's Kareem Bigsburg. So I was just always and I'm like fascinated with entertainment, and I loved it, and I was just deep diving into it. And then I just started to say to myself like, well, I think like there's a part where I can actually action on these things. You know, I'm like, I don't think it's that far away. You just got to find the one person to the one person, and then that curiosity just led me, I think, to where I am here.
It's interesting because most people that are curious also believe that anything's possible. There's so many patterns of thinking that, because you have to be curious, but then you have to be like, well, that's possible. I could just get 1 degree from these things and then just do it myself.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's a special thing about an entrepreneur. It's a scary thing. A lot of times, like, people will say to me like, oh, aren't you uncomfortable? Like, you got to raise money for this, and you got to bring more money for this, and you got to make this work, and you got to make that work. And I'm like, my comfort zone is being uncomfortable.
Yeah, same.
Like, it's just, I'm used to being uncomfortable. So it's comfortable. And nothing really scares me because I'm not attached to the things that I do. My purpose in life is far greater than my jobs or the companies that I start. And I know that. And it's more about how I build things and how I connect with other humans versus what it is I'm actually doing. And I think when you discover that, or at least when I found that sense of peace, the pressure, I was no longer putting this like false pressure on myself.
For sure.
To have to accomplish certain things in certain time frames because I sort of combusted the idea and the meaning of time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a breakthrough because people will put those timelines on themselves and it really fucks with you when you do that. Yeah.
It's like time is such an amazing thing. It's like when we were talking earlier and I was like, oh, when I did that thing and that's how I know that person. And I was like, wow, I've lived like 100 lives. It feels like, but it's also in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a product of not paying attention to time.
Tell me, how do you go about starting a fund? Like, how does this work? What's the process?
So first off, you have to have some experience as an investor. And I think that how I got experience being an investor was I was an entrepreneur. So I built companies. And then I spent a long while advising a lot of companies because once you build companies, it's an acquired skill set to operate, to understand a business model, to understand like the challenges of building certain pieces of technology. And once you have a lot of that under your belt, a lot of companies want that knowledge and information. So I spent a lot of time advising a bunch of different startups, and I started having the opportunity to write small angel checks and into a couple of them. And then I started like looking at, okay, well, this is what I believe would make this company successful. And as I started advising a bunch of companies, I was like, well, I can help make them successful by opening up my network, connecting them to different people, advising them on different approaches to doing certain things, sharing my experience. And then I realized that like the hands-on investor who actually helps a company, you can de-risk your investment because you end up effectively helping the company get to where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of methodology got me into a lot of angel opportunities where I could write my own checks in.
What's an angel opportunity?
So that's when you write like a $5,000 or $10,000 check into a company. And then it's a small bet. It's not venture. Venture is like right now I'll write anywhere from like a $250,000 check to like a $2 to $5 million check. So
for venture.
And that comes from, that's not my own bank account.
Right.
And that wasn't my own bank account when I was 25 years old and having the opportunity to like invest in little things with small amounts of money. That was ultimately as I got into venture. And I got into venture.
But as an angel, that's your own money.
That's your own money, yeah. But I got into venture when I launched my fund with Scooter. And that was a $50 million fund. And we invested in to about 25 plus companies. And then after Raised in Space, I ended up doing this big merger with merging 11 companies together into a technology company called Futureverse, which is insane and don't do this at home. And don't try to merge 2 companies, let alone 11 companies.
So you're doing this all at the same time?
So yeah, this was kind of not all at the same time. So I spent about 4 to 5 years investing alongside Scooter and Race in Space, and that was a thesis around music and entertainment and blockchain. And so I had a really interesting view of AI and metaverse infrastructure from the ground floor. And I came across a company that I had invested into, an AI protocol, and I met one of the co-founders of the protocol, and he was an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur in New Zealand that also had a fund and was investing similarly to me in AI and metaverse infrastructure companies, but was also an entrepreneur. So he had founded a bunch of those companies. And we ended up getting on the phone and talking about our vision for where blockchain goes, where the metaverse goes, where Web3 goes, and how entertainment coincides and collaborates with these technologies, and how we might go do it. And we ended up looking at some of the companies he had invested into, some of the companies he had built, a few that I had known, and we looked at them and said we should merge all these together and create one company, and then go raise a very large amount of money to fund bringing 11 companies together.
How are you getting all these people, all these CEOs and founders on board?
You have to make a situation that is mutually beneficial. You have to find a way for all of the pieces to create a whole. You have to value all the companies based on their contribution. Right. You have to make the pie work. You have to go back to the shareholders of all of those companies and convince them that your larger vision is better than, or more successful and has a higher potential than the one
their singular vision. Yeah.
And then you have to tell a story. And frankly, you have to be willing to lead that. Yes, it's everything we do is tell stories. We're just sitting here right now telling a story.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to make sure that your vision is clear. And so my co-founder Aaron and I, we merged 11 companies into Futureverse and became one company. And overnight, we had 300 people. And so this was no small.
Wow.
This was as ambitious as you could possibly get in an industry that is in its infancy, which is the metaverse. And people don't even know what that is.
And right. And this is, and I'd love to hear your take on what it is.
Of course.
But this is after Raise in Space?
Yeah. So this was after I deployed all the capital for the most part. And then one of the companies was a company that Raise in Space invested into. And that's how this whole thing came to be. It's like it continues to happen. Just one interconnected thing just makes it all come to be. And so Futureverse was born through the acquisition of a bunch of companies, one being one that I invested into with Raise in Space. And then I jumped in there full time. And I told Scooter I was going, and that's how I wanted this whole thing to play out. And
he understood it. He understood. He was cool.
Scooter is a believer in people. And that's one of the greatest gifts that I've gotten is he's believed in me. From
Scooter Braun we're talking about.
Yeah, from early on. I mean, that's Scooter. Look at Scooter's career. He believes in a human and he helps them reach their potential. And so he said, he's always believed in me. And he's like, you'll go, keep going. So I went and I jumped over to Futureverse, and then from there we decided to raise another fund on the side because I believe one of my
with Futureverse?
It's alongside Futureverse. It's called Born Ready.
Not with Scooter. Yes, okay, Born Ready.
Yeah, so
sorry, you were going to say you believe? I didn't.
I believe that secret sauce, I don't know what you'd call it, like the thing that with investing, a lot of people do one or the other. I believe that investing and building at the same time gives you absolute magic because you can make investments into companies that you could potentially acquire into a larger company, or you can incentivize entrepreneurs to partner with you in different ways by helping them grow their companies. So the tandem of investing and operating is something that is a huge part of what I do and probably something that I'll do for a long time. And so I knew I wanted to have a fund on the side so that when I have a crazy idea, which is every day, I would have, twice a day, I would have the ability to incubate that idea and get it off the ground and then go plug in the right people to run it. or I'd be able to invest in other founders that I believed were changing the world. And then I could help them do that. And so I raised another fund. It's called Born Ready, and that's on the side of Futureverse. And we invest in companies that are leveraging the Futureverse platform and all of our protocols that are in that technology stack.
Okay, so what's the Futureverse platform?
So Futureverse is an AI and metaverse infrastructure company, which means that we have layers of protocols and software that have different functions for the journey through Web3, which is, and the metaverse, which is now, these are big terms that people are like, well, what really is the metaverse and what is Web3? And there's a really simple way to explain it.
Yeah.
It's the evolution of the internet where you control and have control over your data and your finances and your assets. So right now you have no choice on the internet. You don't think anything for yourself. We're talking right now, Siri, because our phones are here, is listening to us.
Mm-hmm.
Siri's hearing the things we're saying, pulling up the ads that Siri's going to serve us. And then when we go home and we leave, we're going to order a shirt or a shoe or something that was served to us. We don't think on the internet.
Right.
Thought happens for us. We have no choice. And that has to change because humans lose all of their autonomy and their decision-making power, and they become angry. I'm simplifying the process and jumping, but when you lack choice, you lack an understanding of who you are. And that, I think, is a much deeper and philosophical reason for why there's so much divisiveness in the world, is there's a complete disconnect between people's minds and their hearts and their souls. They don't know who they are or what they want to be in the world. So you need to have that choice in order to have that. And Web3 and the metaverse is effectively the technology that allows you to have that choice. It allows you to control who you are, your bank accounts, the things that you provide access to with a brand or with a fan or with anyone that you want to connect with.
Okay.
So it sounds virtuous.
So how? No, I know, but
yeah.
Let's try and break it down for somebody, a layman.
Yeah.
How do I have control? So give me an example, maybe.
I'll make it really, really simple. Okay. So the blockchain creates effectively an authentication of a asset, which could be a digital collectible, or it could be a cryptocurrency. And it says that Ruiz bought this cryptocurrency at this time, and it publishes a public record of that. It identifies via technology, not another human verifying it, that you own one of these particular things. And those things then exist in your wallet, and you have direct control to pull them back, to sell them the way you want to sell them, to make money when you sell something. And so it's digitizing our entire world and bringing it back to a singular connection point that is for you and is not controlled by a corporation. So right now, if you post a photo to Instagram or to TikTok or to YouTube, all of this content that's going to go out, they control that content now.
Absolutely.
You put something on TikTok, TikTok says you can't take this and put it on Instagram. Instagram, deep within the weeds, says you're allowing me to train on your face and your likeness and everything in all of our AIs.
100%.
You completely are giving up everything that you have control over, your autonomy,
without even knowing
who you
it.
are, without even knowing it. And so the promise of Web3 and a lot of this technology that enables it, which, by the way, shouldn't be something that is known. Like, I shouldn't be like, oh, we're using Web3. Like, we never knew that we were using Web2. So why are we talking about using Web3?
That's very true.
I think when new technology emerges, there is often this fear and there are these people that need to promote the particular technology. And so a narrative and words and labels get put on particular things and they take on a life of their own and they confuse people, and then you lack the understanding of what they actually are. So we shouldn't be talking about Web3 or the metaverse or all these terms. We should instead say that the internet is evolving to a place where you will have more control over the things that you love and that you hold.
Right.
And it's that simple. And when you think about it like that, doesn't that sound like a really good thing?
Yeah, of course it does. It sounds amazing, actually, if I have control of every single aspect of that and I don't have these devices listening in on exactly what I'm thinking over the conversations, I should say, that I'm having, and then get served up an ad and then go and...
And some of that is going to happen, and it's going to keep happening because some of these things are hard to change. But there are components of this type of technology that are going to change behaviors in a good way to give people new opportunity.
I think the challenge for a lot of, well, I'll say the challenge for me. So like I have the wallet, I have the crypto, or the coins, or crypto, yeah. But it's the like getting the wallet.
It's hard to use.
It's hard to use. So it just like, and as you said, like I'm a curious person. I like to learn this stuff, but a lot of it you learn it, and then it's like if I'm not doing it on a regular basis, I'm gonna forget how this thing works.
That's only a product of the beginning of the development of these new technologies.
This is so early.
They're so early, and that's exactly why we built Futureverse, to make the technology invisible, to put the technology where it belongs, underneath the hood.
Yeah.
So Futureverse is not a sexy consumer company. It is an AI and infrastructure company, and then we have platforms, like I just announced my generative AI music platform called Gen.
Yes.
It's just called Gen.
Which is amazing.
You don't need to know all the technology underneath. All you need to know is that I licensed the music. I didn't steal it from anyone.
Right.
And so the outputs that come out of it, if you want to imagine a song and type a song in that you can create in seconds, that output is not going to infringe on all the copyrights that we work so hard in the music industry to promote and create and give our hearts and souls to.
Yeah.
And so that Gen is an example of a company that was built using the Futureverse infrastructure, but you don't need to see all that infrastructure. You just need to go onto a website and type in the song you want to hear, and bam, in 1 second it makes it.
Yeah. Well, and let's not skip over that, because I mean, you just announced Gen. How, and everybody's having a conversation about AI, generative AI, music, and all that. You did it in a way that is ethical.
Yep.
And there's a lot of companies out there that are not doing it that way. A bunch of them are getting sued at this moment in time. Fascinating pieces of technology. That's where the world is going, whether we like it or not. So it has to be figured out. But I think you did a lot of hard work in the beginning to make this in a way that is ethical for the artists, for the creators. Can you tell me a little bit about that and that process, and how yours differentiates from the others?
Yeah, so I think the idea of AI music, to go back a step, was always something that I wasn't really interested in. As an investor, I got pitched a bunch of AI music companies.
For the right reasons, though.
Yeah.
Because you come from the space.
I come from music, and I grew up on the blues and rock and roll. And these are, and my relationship with music is why we all work in music. You love music, it touches you, it changes you. And so the authenticity of what is in that songwriting and the production and the people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into these songs that we love, like that has an energy and a magic that I always thought, can a computer ever emulate this?
Right.
And my gut was like, initially, no, it can't. And then I realized that, well, what if we're not trying to replace that? What if we're just trying to complement it? What if we're trying to create a platform where someone who might not have the musicality or the instrument knowledge, or maybe only plays one instrument but has a song in their heart and they want to create all the other instruments just in their room. They don't have other friends who play all the instruments or access to other producers or creators, and they just want to type something in to create what they want to hear. That is a totally different opportunity. And knowing the nuances of the music industry and publishing and licensing and the complexities around how many artists and producers are on a particular track, that was something that my expertise and background afforded me the knowledge and understanding of, that if you are taking catalogs of music and training your AI models on those songs that you don't own, you are absolutely demolishing the artistry that was put into those tracks, and you don't have the rights to do that.
Right.
And you will, by default, create derivatives of those songs, because training an AI is...
That's interesting. Defaults of the derivatives of the original copyrights?
The original copyrights.
Yeah.
And
without
permission. And that is, I mean, that would be like if we took a song and placed it in a commercial and didn't license it.
Yeah,
like that would not fly.
Yeah, of course.
So and that's why it's not flying today, because you can't do this. You can't train that way. AI training is obviously a hot topic in general, not just in music, but in the GPTs and the large language models. It's, well, where did they get all this information?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of debate around this new age of AI, and of course, a lot of fear, like you brought up. I think that AI can be as collaborative as we want it to be, and it can be as positive as we want it to be if we make choices now to do things and train in ways that are acknowledging anyone's material or copyrights that would be a part of the training sets. And I think that given how fast it's moving, it's becoming this sort of confusing territory where the technology is moving faster than people can wrap their heads around, well, what do we do? And what are the parameters and what are the regulations? And how do we go after people who are not doing it ethically?
And how do you even
And then you have to go into siloed industries and figure out how those industries operate and what is the historical protocol for how you go after something, or how you find justice, or how you participate compensation-wise, or whatever it may be. It's a really complex space to solve for, but it has to be solved now because we're at the very beginning.
But you did a lot of it though. So what was that? How long did it take for you to go and figure those out?
Yeah, it took me over a year.
With independent publishers and writers?
Independent publishers, independent production music catalogs. And I've, in conversations with the majors, it was a relentless process of education.
You did it with the majors as well?
I'm in conversations with them. I went out and talked to everyone who owned copyrights. Actually, my initial approach was not to go in initially and say, hey, I want to propose an offer to you. Here's a framework for how we should license. It was, hey, I want to talk to you about where AI is headed. I want to tell you what my view and what my approach is and how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I want to educate you on what's going to happen in the space, what I believe the space will become, and how I think you should be thinking about how it's going to transform your business and what you do, which is kind of like reputationally, this is what I do.
I was going to say,
I just continue to go back and say, your business is going to evolve in the next 5 to 10 years. Here's what might happen.
Yeah.
Do you want to get ahead of it?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be behind the 8 ball?
Right.
It's up to you. The choice is yours. And most people are like, we want to be behind the 8 ball. I wish they'd just say that.
Yeah.
Because they don't. They just are slow, and I don't blame them. There's a misalignment of incentives in a lot of entertainment industries and a lot of businesses that don't incentivize innovation. And so if you're an executive at a company, you don't care if in 5 years a piece of technology pulls from their revenue or necessarily adds to it, unless you've been there for the long haul, or you plan to be there for the long haul, or you're incentivized. You don't have the fire to go be like, AI is going to change our industry, and we need to, as copyright owners or catalog owners, we need to participate in that. You just don't have any incentive to do that.
It doesn't matter much.
It doesn't matter. And so that's why a lot of these conversations have been slow moving, because there isn't a need to get ahead. And a lot of people, music historically, entertainment historically, everything historically, is a sit back and wait. Like, it's too early to know how this is going to pan out. But I live in it's too early to know, and I just want to create it so that I do know. I don't ever want to be in it's too early to know. I'll just decide what I think it's going to be and then build to that so that it builds that way.
How does someone who is thinking the way that you do, how you've carved so many frontiers, especially for women, how does somebody get to this place in this world that how you operate?
One thing I've never done, and I just thought of this the second you brought that up, I've never thought that I'm any different. So I've worked with a lot of powerful men, a lot of amazingly powerful men, at the top of their industries, moguls of their industries. And I've never thought I'm less than, or I'm not, I don't have a voice in this conversation. And a lot of these people that I've partnered with or have worked with have responded really well to that. I mean, reputationally, and I think this is cliche, when you're very direct as a woman, you often get a reputation for either being intense or aggressive or whatever it may be. But I've just viewed a lot of what I do as giving my perspective.
Yeah.
And you could take it or leave it, and with no hard feelings. And I've done that. Scooter will tell you I've done that with him. Mike Karen, who I've worked with for now 8-9 years, and he's a brilliant genius in everything that he does. I've sat in front of Mike and I said, Mike, I think this is how it should be, and this is how I see it playing out. Mm-hmm. And he'll conversationally say, yeah, well, if that happens, like we could get to that by way of this, and we can get by way of that. And he is a mogul in his particular domain as well. But I never I never look at anyone as you're a man, I'm a woman, or as a result of my age or anything about me, I don't have an opportunity to tell you my perspective.
Right.
And I think that's maybe one of the things that women don't have to do, is they don't have to view themselves as less than. Because once you view yourself as someone that is deserving of respect and appreciation, you often get that in return. Mm-hmm. And so that's not to take away from some of the challenges of the paradigms or a lot of the state of the world, but I think that a lot of it is also up to you.
For sure. I'll never know the plight of a woman. As a Latino in this space, in the music space, more so in the film space, I would find it tough sometimes, but it was the same way. I'm like, I don't think less of myself because of my ethnicity or because I don't see so many. It did suck that I didn't see so many Latinos or people that look like me in that space. A lot of the reason why I went into the music business, but when it came to film production, at least at home, our company became one of the biggest service companies in Canada. And it was a Filipino kid, Ray Mendoza, who's my co-founder and business partner at Mad Ruck, and it was myself. And we were contracting so many people. Yeah. But we never thought of ourselves as less than. And it was like a very personal thing for us as well, too, where I don't know, I'm just me, and I'm going to go with that. And do the best I can and be a good person in this process, Yeah,
I completely agree with that. And I've always thought, like, I will just be what I want to see. Like, I always wanted, of course, I feel the same way as a lot of women. I want to see more opportunity or more women at the top.
Yeah, for sure.
I view it as it's my responsibility then to get there and to show other women that it's possible. That's the best way, in my opinion, to be kind and gracious, to support women as much as I can, and to bring them together as much as I can, which I do, I host a lot of dinners. I try wholeheartedly to listen every opportunity that I have to young women who are trying to find their way. And I think the best way that I could make change in the world is just truly be who and what I want to see. And so I will stand in leadership roles with my whole heart to show that you can lead in a different way. You can lead with grace, you can lead with heart, and I can be the leader that I always wanted to see. And I have had the luxury, especially in music, to see some amazing women come before me who have gone out there and with a lot of integrity and goodwill and fight and get up there and say like, this has to change and look at how we're going to change it. And I just aim to continue to be a part of that. Yeah.
And I also think this as well too, like in I don't know, maybe this is just the world that I live in and this is how I see it, but I also do think that, like, man, if you're a piece of shit, like you're a lot of men who are pieces of shit. I mean, you can get to a certain place in success, but like you're not gonna get too far. Not in this day and age. Not in 2024. Do you find that? Or
well, I think it's more. I don't even look at it like that. More so than I look at, they must be miserable.
Yeah. That's like, for sure.
So if they're at the top, but they're a terrible human, like,
what does it matter?
What does it matter, and where are you going? And like, I think that's
why are you doing it? That like, what gives you, like, what's enjoyable about that?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I think is interesting. Like, I'm not necessarily I don't have this like expectation of myself. I've accomplished everything I could have ever dreamed of as a little
100%.
girl. And so in my view, I'm not climbing up.
Yeah.
I'm just going on a journey.
Yeah.
And so there's nowhere that I'm trying to get, but in every moment and in everything I do, I try to emulate the thing that I want people around me to embody and that I believe women can bring to the table, which is elegance and grace and compassion and empathy. And that doesn't mean that men don't have it. And I've had the luxury of meeting amazing ones in business that do. But I think that is something that we can lead with and show that it's possible to be successful and lead with those qualities.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, how ultimately women will have more opportunity.
No, I love that. I mean, listen, in so many ways, I look up to you and your journey and what you've done as well. A lot, and I mean, my first guest was Troy Carter. I met Troy Carter, who I've looked up to for years through you and the dinner that you did with Zach at Raising Space. That's how I met one of the people who I consider a mentor, who I can pick up the phone. So you've been there in my career in so many different ways. And it's like people like you, I love connecting with because it's like, oh, this is great energy. And then you're always just kind of like looking at the new frontier. And you know me, I'm like, well, okay, so how does this work? How does this operate? And whether I dive into it or not, or whether it's for me or for not, you're always there to actually, give the information and talk about it. But I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
You talk about that. You do that with everybody, which is amazing.
And that's like, when I hear that, when you told me that before, I was like, wow, how lucky am I that I could create an opportunity of bringing people together. And then you could find in that someone that could be a mentor to you and that you could have a connection with. I think that's what I live for, is human connection. I love talking to people and finding out like what's in their minds and what do they want to accomplish and what do they want to do and who do they want to be and who are they? And people don't often know, but I love asking the question because I think it allows us to help each other evolve.
The question?
The question of who you are.
Oh, yeah.
Like in general, it's one of my favorite topics because people are like,
it's a hard one to answer.
I'm a music manager. I'm like, no, that's what you do. That's not who you are.
It's a very North American answer.
And it's a hard thing. I mean, that's why we're here as humans to find that. But I think we can work in these industries together. We can be collaborators. We can be partners in different projects. We can connect each other. But what it's really about at the end of the day is like, how did we make someone feel and what opportunity did we give them and what did we leave them with? And for me, I'm fulfilled by sharing my perspective of reality because in my reality, I think it's really fun. Like, I think life is amazing and there's lots of amazing shit to do. And so if I could offer that opportunity to you to find someone or something to be inspired by, like that's what we live for.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, exactly. You're very giving with your information. Always.
Because why not?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people view like, oh, I can't share information because someone's going to steal it or be competitive or get ahead of me. Like, and I think that is a really common reason why a lot of people stay private,
For sure.
Like I've heard all those quotes on Instagram that are like, don't share information, just show them where you get. And it's like, no one has the same path anyway.
Yeah.
There's just no way, even if I gave you my business plan for one of my businesses, and I say this to my employees all the time, like if I give you my business plan, you can't build it the same way I would build it. You would build it from your perspective.
Yeah.
Which might be great and good for you if you want to go do it. But it won't be the same. And so we hoard things. Why? There's a plan for us. And it's going to happen whether someone else has the plan.
Right.
And no one has the plan.
Yeah.
Because you never know the plan, which is the fun part of it all.
I keep ideas to myself until I'm ready to communicate it. And this is something that Troy and I talked about as well too, because I don't like Dreamkillers.
Yeah.
And I get pissed off at people when they don't see it. I don't get pissed off at people, but I get frustrated at myself that I wasn't able to communicate my idea and the other person be like, I think it's, you're right. But so I won't say my idea until it's fully fleshed out. Yeah. And like this podcast, for example, is like something that I kept so close to the chest for a long time, up until like 6-8 months ago, you know, and it was like, and even then when I was shooting it, I was like very quietly calling people in, let's shoot this, because I didn't want the Dreamkillers like, oh, you're doing that? Like, I'm like, no, I think this is valuable and I think there's something here to it, because I don't like hearing the person saying like, no, that's not gonna work, because sometimes it could penetrate the mind, be like, man, maybe they're right, you know? You think about it.
That's only an expectation that something will be different than what you want it to become, and it will be, no matter what. So it's really interesting, because I've had this conversation and debate so many times around the idea of when you put something into the world.
Right.
And I'm a perfectionist in a lot of ways. I'm not anymore, in the sense that I've kind of defined what I think perfection is, and now it's just it's just about push it out and perception, and just it's your perception. And when you plant a seed, that's how something grows. If you don't plant the seed, how is it going to go? And I used to make everything perfect, design logos, design branding, be like, it can't go out, it's not ready, it has to be perfect, it has to be perfect. And then I learned that you just put something out in the world and then you work it from there.
100%.
And people don't remember anything.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
It's interesting. I had this conversation today, and I had this like magic moment happen where someone wrote me an email and basically said no to an offer that I made. And I immediately thought, well, they're only saying no because they don't know what the opportunity is. And I realized there's no such thing as a no. There's only the fact that the person saying no to you doesn't know exactly what you're trying to communicate, accomplish, or see your vision. And so if you remember that there's no such thing as a no, it's just a not now, or a you need to give them more knowledge so that they know more, your whole perception of the way that you think about things will change. And you can put things out into the world and then put it out also with the energy you want it to be received.
Right.
So that's, I think, is something that I learned and have since practiced, and in the last few years have really practiced, which is what people will receive is what you put into it. So if you put into something a bunch of fear, if you're like, oh, okay, I'm putting this podcast out into the world, but how is it going to be received? And I'm worried about what people are thinking, and I'm fearful that someone might be a dream killer and might say no to it or might not like it. Then basically in the package of the podcast, as you're bundling it up, you're adding all this fear to it.
You're putting that energy to it. Yeah,
and so when someone receives it, they don't even know why, but they're receiving it with fear. It just feels fearful.
Right.
And so I think the energy of things is something that is, as an entrepreneur, is something I realized I can control.
That's so true. No, that's so true though, because I think of this and everything that we do, the way for me to get past those ideas of concern is to always remember that this is a service.
Yes.
I'm just here to give a service to people. And if that is the number one value in anything that we do, in life really, but especially in the music business as an artist, especially somebody in technology or a fund who's allocating capital, you're providing a service, you're ultimately in this world that where we're speaking this information and not keeping it private and giving it out to the masses. If I'm constantly thinking about that as the number one value, it generally goes very well.
Yeah, because it's all in your intention.
Yeah, exactly.
This is why I'm obsessed with quantum physics and quantum mechanics, because it shows that energy exists and is in motion at all times. And energy is what we feel between each other. And so that when I started to like really understand that, it was important for me to be really clear about who I was and always clear on what I was doing.
Yes.
And so that's why, like, when you say dream killer, I think about like, I don't think I know any dream killers, maybe because I'm not interested in seeing them. So I don't let them come into my
world
zone. They can't enter my field, because I'm like, if you want to kill my dream, then you're just a negative energy or human that I don't want to interact with anyway.
Right.
So like, go be where you are. And I'll be where I am.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something that is really important to understand, because I think what you give your energy to grows, and what you don't give your energy to goes
100%.
away.
Yeah, 100%.
So fuck the Dreamkillers.
Fuck the Dreamkillers.
Yeah.
Okay, I asked this to most of the guests that I'm on. What are 3 books that you would recommend? We talked about one, Blue Ocean.
Yeah. Oh, I love Blue Ocean Strategy. I have 3 books easily. I have 10 books. I have 100 books. I'm a absolute book person. Let's see what order I want to go in. So this is an interesting one. It sounds religious, but it's not. But my first one would be Conversations with God.
I thought you were going to say the Bible.
No, not the Bible. I'm not.
Low-key, I've always wanted to read the Bible.
I'm not religious. Respect all religions, but very spiritual. But Conversations with God, it absolutely changed my life, because I think that we all believe, no matter what our religion is, that there's some higher power, or there's some magic that's guiding us that we can tap into when we want to tap into it. And Conversations with God is an interesting perspective on, what if you met God? What would God say? And it is absolutely mind-blowing. And the second one I swear by is The 4 Agreements.
Right.
The 4 Agreements. Did I give you a copy of The 4 Agreements in my office? Because I give it out like it's water.
No.
I didn't?
No.
I feel like I remember giving you
That's
one.
not Paulo Coelho. That's a...
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Ruiz, it's Ruiz, yeah.
See? It's meant to be. You need to read it.
I gotta read
The 4 Agreements.
I've seen it for years,
teaches to not take anything personally and to not make assumptions. And that's where you don't think about Dreamkillers.
Yeah.
Because you're just...
I'll be clear, I don't take it personal. Again, like...
You just know they exist.
They exist, but you know what it is? To your point, I think about it as more like, I wasn't ready to communicate that.
Yes.
They were confused on how I was communicating it. Yeah. That's on me. So I got to get better at that. That's and then so the next.
Speaking of getting better at communicating, my third book would be Nonviolent Communication.
Nonviolent communication. Yeah. I've never heard of it.
Highly recommend. It teaches you how to communicate with people nonviolently, and it reminds you and enlightens you to the fact that we communicate very violently. We don't listen.
Right.
We don't stop to think about somebody else's needs in a particular moment of time. And as a leader and as an entrepreneur and as a sister and as a friend and as a human, I realized that there's no moment where someone else's needs shouldn't be at the forefront of my mind to understand how to communicate better with an individual. Mm-hmm. So if you know what someone else, and I use this in business as much as I use it in personal, if not maybe more in business. If you understand what someone needs in a particular negotiation or a particular deal or whatever it may be, you know how to create a mutually beneficial opportunity. Yes. When something isn't mutually beneficial, it goes to shit.
Yes.
It's over. But if you can communicate by way of understanding the person's needs and then not judging them, not berating them, not doing things that we actually don't even realize that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so nonviolent communication teaches you how to use words and the power of words and how words can be violent and they can be destructive and they more often than not kill opportunities. So if you want to create better opportunities, you have to learn to communicate better, and nonviolent communication is like absolute. And if I could give you a bonus one, because it's really important.
Well, hold that thought, because you know what that book reminds me a lot, which I love, is Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss.
Love it. Totally agree.
Yeah. It's just like, in order to get to a certain place, you really have to listen. You really have to listen to the other person, and and ask questions. Don't assume. All those same things that from nonviolent communication is what it sounds like.
The listening thing, I think, is something that I've focused on in the last few years and changed my life.
Same.
Because I used to talk.
Same.
I used to be like, oh, I'm doing this cool thing. And it was out of, in my heart, it was out of passion, and it was out of like, I want to show you all these things, and I read these books and I want to share all this stuff. But then I realized actually you can learn more by just shutting the fuck up.
What was the quote? Somebody, was it the quote is like, you never learn anything by talking?
You don't. If you just listen, then you hear someone's needs. Yeah. And that's what's amazing about nonviolent communication is you realize how often you have no idea what someone needs. And usually at the end of the day, the need is love, because we're all human and that's what we're here looking for. But when you when you realize like you're sitting across from someone or you're doing a business deal and you haven't understood where they're coming from, why they're in this circumstance, why you might buy their company or
exactly.
or partner with them, then you're just starting off on this uneven ground. But yeah, I think it's amazing to understand and to listen and to learn to stop talking, because you'll hear everything you need to know. Like you think that we need, like, not you, we think we need to get to know people by like interacting with them. We actually don't need the two-way at all. If you just hear someone talk, you'll understand everything you need to know about them. If you just listen to the things they have, if you actually hear. But we don't hear because we're too interested in making sure that someone sees a perception of our reality that we want them to see. And so we're always telling a story instead of just being like, well, what if I don't tell a story? What if I just listen to your story? Then how would I respond naturally? We're always thinking about what we're going to say before we say it. And so I think that's what I attribute meditation to.
That's the whole, Chris Voss talks about that as well in the book. It's like we are schizophrenic in our own minds.
Absolutely.
There's so many things that you're waiting to say when somebody else is talking, but if you just listen, and you don't think, then it becomes a lot more clear.
That's why you don't need questions. You just do a conversation with someone and it's like you listen to the answer and then you say the thing that you want to say.
To be fair, there's questions here.
No, I know you have
but
some.
I have not looked at this. I barely look at this. To be honest, I did a couple of pods with like the iPad here in my lap, and I'm like, I don't even know why I have an iPad. It's like, it's just not.
Because you don't need it. Because it's like, once you're in the conversation, if you're engaged, you know what the next question is that you should go to.
Exactly.
So the fourth book.
Yeah, what's the fourth book I was going to ask?
The Magic of Believing.
Okay.
And it talks about how your reality becomes what you believe. A lot of people will say, I need to see it to believe it. And I've always been like, that makes no sense. Because you're just going to be in this purgatory waiting to see something.
Yeah.
So you'll never believe. I always say that to my mom. She's like, I need to see it. I'm like, but what if you never see it? Then do you never believe it? Because you never see it. And our minds are not capable of, our minds are capable of seeing something that we haven't seen in real life. But if you're trying to see it, you're not going to see that much. Like, we don't have a lot of time here on this planet. Like, it feels long. It depends on who you are and if you meditate or not, but we don't have a lot of time here. And so, like, there's not that much you're going to see. Like, how many people do you come across that are like, oh, I wish I went on that trip? Or I wish I did this, or well, now I can't because I have kids, or I'm traveling here, I have my work, so we don't get to see that much in the world. So if you're waiting to just see something, you're probably not going to see it. And so the Magic of Believing talks about how you can create anything by just believing it first, and then you'll see it by believing it. And I think that when a friend of mine gave me that book, I had already lived by that philosophy, but it cemented it.
Yeah. It was just, put it in real words, it's concrete.
It was tattooed at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in my DNA after I read that book.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But I have a book list that I send to a lot of people that's like,
flip it over to me.
Here's all the things I'll give you.
Flip it over. What we'll do is then I'll just put it on socials. We'll just make 10 and that list.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. What's next for you?
I only stay in the moment.
I knew you were going to say that.
So I'm here now, and I love seeing people do what they love. And like, you're doing what you love. And like, I think that that's what matters. Yeah. Like, I don't look at the past, and the future's never going to be here. Because think about it. Every second is just, the future's not here. Yeah. So like, if you're waiting for this moment in time that you'll never get to, you're going to be waiting. So my view is like, if you stay in the moment, everything comes from that moment in time. So I don't know. I'll know what I'm doing in an hour.
You know what? I did have this one last question, actually. Mm-hmm. How many companies do you run?
At the moment, I run about 4 or 5. And I'll launch my 10th at some point later this year. That's been one that I've actually been developing for 5-6 years. Okay. But yeah, I run a lot of companies.
And do you, what was I going to say? You're in the day-to-day of these companies that you run?
In different varying degrees, yeah.
Do these include the funds?
These are, one is my technology company, Futureverse.
Yeah.
The other is my fund that's on the side, Born Ready. We just launched our generative music platform called Gen. We have a consumer metaverse play called the Readyverse, which I licensed the rights to Ready Player One to bring sort of the themes that are in the Ready Player One is Steven Spielberg's movie about the metaverse, talk about full circle.
Crazy.
That all came back full circle. And so there are themes within Ready Player One that showcase what the metaverse can be. So we're building technology and gamified experiences that bring that to life. So that's the Readyverse. And then I have a music management company that we don't even have to touch on, but I manage an artist over there, and I do a lot of creative. I have a lot of friends that are in varying sports and acting and fitness that I advise, and it all kind of happens though. Like nothing falls, no plates drop, because I think when you love what you do.
I was gonna say how, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because to like hit the meditation thing like just one more final time. Someone asked me a question the other day that I hadn't been asked before, and I loved it because I always say, like, people always be like, well, how do you do all this and how do you have time? And I'm always like jokingly, I'm always like, oh, I bend time. And I mean that, but it's a weird thing. Like if I said to you, oh, I bend time, like if I was very serious, like
I'd be like, I get it, right.
You'd be like, what is that? And so
I'll let you talk.
So someone asked me finally, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, if you asked me if I could have one wish, what would I wish for? And the answer would be that I'd wish for more time, because I think that I love doing everything I'm doing in life. Like I love my relationships in the world. I love my friendships in the world. I love my businesses that I built. Like I just am grateful to be here all the time. And I always think like, I don't really want this to end. Not that I believe that there's an end. Obviously, if I'm spiritual, I don't think there's an end. But I'm always in the moment, and I'm like, I want more time here. I want to do all these ideas and all these things. I have 10 more companies I want to start. So I always thought like, well, what is the state of your body when you feel like time is flying? Like, when you're like, oh, where did that day go, or where did that year go? And I always feel like that when time is speeding up, my heart is beating really, really, really fast. And when time feels slow, my heart is beating really, really, really slow. So I thought like, well, the day feels longer when my heart beats a lot slower. And that's when I started realizing that meditation would slow, obviously, it's like obvious science, but by breathing and sitting, meditation slows down your heartbeat to very, very slow. And then when my body feels like it's very calm and very peaceful and moving very slow, meditation allows me to slow down time and do more and build more and meet more people and be here when I probably have like 900,000 emails and messages.
In the last 2 hours?
In the last 2 hours, easily. Sure. But it doesn't matter because you'll get to it all. And as long as you don't put the pressure on yourself that something is going to explode tomorrow if you don't do it. Like, the sun comes up again and things just keep moving. And you don't need to panic about anything.
It's a really good way to look at things. And to be honest, that's a really good thing to understand, to value your time.
Yeah.
And what that means. Mm-hmm. And how to slow that down.
Yeah.
And how you do that is really amazing. Honestly, I really appreciate the time sitting down here with you and talking.
This is really fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome, right?
Thanks for letting me ask you a couple questions.
No, you know what? You're the first person
You better keep them in.
I'll keep them in. I'll keep the questions
keep them in.
You're the first person to like really ask a question.
Yeah, because it's not a one-way street.
No, it's a conversation for sure.
And that's what I love. I love learning about humans and hearing how your mind ticks and your heart ticks and like what makes you think about these things.
Yeah.
Because that teaches us so much. And then we can make decisions and other things that we do with a whole different perspective when we get other people's perspectives. So thank you for giving me yours.
No, of course. And thank you to you. And you keep a busy day, and it's been amazing speaking to you. I've learned so much, and I think people are going to love this. This is awesome. Thank you, Shara.
It was really fun. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.